Hey y'all, and welcome to the Max Life. Today I want to share with y'all something that I have had questions about for a really long time. It's something that I have been doing for a couple of years now, and I think you're going to be surprised at just how easy it really is. So let's get started.
Can't believe I live in your thoughts. I think about you all the time, morning, evening, and midnight. Such a wonderful delight.
First, I really want to approach this as like a question-answer based style of teaching. So we all know that our chickens lay eggs abundantly in the spring and the summer. Ours even lay really well into the fall, but really slow up in the winter when it gets cold and there's just not as much light. So instead of cutting yourself short and taking your eggs and giving them away to your local community, here is a way that you can preserve your eggs by literally taking them right out of the chicken coop and putting them on your shelf without them going bad. So the first thing I want to talk about is some supplies that you will need to keep your eggs. The first thing is a glass jar. Now, some people have used plastic. I just don't recommend plastic. If you use plastic like food grade buckets, make sure that they're food grade. Glass really is the best way to go. I also want to talk about the size of the glass jar. Would recommend not to use anything any bigger than a gallon, and we will go over that in just a few minutes, the reason why. A smaller glass jar, this is a little bit bigger than a quart, but not as big as a gallon. Now, there are a lot of ways that you can go about getting glass jars without having to break the bank. First thing you can do is hit up social media. Let people in your community know that you're looking for old pickle jars, people that have kids active in sports, that work in concession stands, or even have any type of connection there. A lot of times they can get those pickle jars for you for free instead of throwing them in the garbage. So it's a win-win. Save the glass, give it to somebody who can use it. A lot of times people will clean out, they have collected mini glass jars. Like I said, this one is bigger than a quart, but not as big as a gallon. It is right there in the middle. You can see it was an old pickle jar. I got these glass jars because I put it on social media that I was looking for some glass jars. Someone went to an auction and they had a humongous section of all old pickle jars, and I picked up about 40 for $10. Someone contacted me and said, hey, here's some glass jars, I know you need them. That was a steal. You do want to find glass that has a lid. It does not need to be airtight, just enough to cover it up. You're also going to need lime. This is called calcium hydroxide, also known as pickling lime. You're gonna need that to preserve your eggs. Clean, farm fresh eggs, store-bought eggs absolutely will not work, and we're gonna talk about that in just a minute. And the only other thing you need is water, and you're gonna label your eggs. So I want to jump right into the very first question, and that is, can I use store-bought eggs? And the answer is no. And here's the reason why. Store-bought eggs have been washed. Sometimes they put bleach on them. A lot of things are done to store-bought eggs that absolutely will not work. When your chicken, or if you get them from a fresh farm that has not washed the eggs, the hens secrete a sticky substance, y'all try to say that fast, that coats the egg. Eggshells are actually porous, so that coating is a protective layer on your egg, and that does not need to be washed off. So store-bought eggs simply will not work. It has to be farm fresh eggs that have been unwashed. Now I want to jump right into the next question. How do I get clean eggs, since you're saying I cannot use dirty eggs? Keep the bedding in your coop clean when you know you're ready to gather eggs. So if you say, hey, I'm about to start water glassing, Go ahead and make sure that your chicken bedding is clean, so when your hens jump up there and start laying eggs, it won't be muddy and nasty. It's also more ideal when you know, if you look at the weather forecast and can say, I know it's not going to rain for these X amount of days, put you some clean bedding in there, gather your eggs up those days for your water glassing. You do not want to use dirty eggs, because if you put dirty eggs in here that have chicken poop and mud on them, it's just going to make your water nasty and leaves grounds for bacteria to breed, and you do not want that in your jar. Can I use anything to store my eggs in? So because we're using such a heavy concentration of lime to preserve our eggs, I don't think that plastic is a great idea. So I'm going to recommend glass for that reason. Also, you can see what is going on inside of your glass jars, which we'll get to again in a little bit, but I just recommend glass. I feel like it is the best option. Why use a smaller jar and not anything big? Like I have several, okay, here's an example. My kombucha is in this big 3-gallon jar. Why would I not want to use that? When you start stacking your eggs in your glass jar, which we're gonna demonstrate in just a minute, so y'all hang with me. Once we start stacking our eggs in this jar, the ones on the bottom are gonna feel the weight of that. And eventually, if you continue to wait on those eggs, you're gonna see problems in the bottom of your jar. So I do not recommend using really big jars or buckets, because I think you're gonna see problems with that. I recommend around this size, no larger than a gallon jar for your eggs. Here's another question. What if my water gets cloudy? So you're gonna see me mix up a water and lime ratio in just a minute. I'm gonna share those details with you guys so you can do your very own eggs as well. But initially, when you get your eggs in there and you begin to pour your water and lime solution over your eggs, it is gonna be cloudy. But as you saw in my eggs that I already have in storage, the lime begins to settle in the bottom and your water should be clear. If you happen to notice your water is cloudy after your eggs have been sitting on the shelf, you need to check your eggs. Sometimes if you're not very careful with selecting your eggs to put in your jar and you have a weak shell and they crack in your jar, most of the time the cracks will calcify themselves off and your egg will turn hard. I will just chunk those eggs if I get any of those eggs out. Sometimes the really weak shells will crack and you will get yucky water. I would go ahead and use those eggs. A couple of things first. First, if I ran into cloudy water, I would smell it. If it is really foul, then that egg has probably been busted for a long time and you just missed it. I would probably give all of those to my pigs, or if you do not have pigs, I would go ahead and chunk them. If you notice that your water is starting to get cloudy and you smelled it and it doesn't smell wonderful, but it's not extremely foul, and I have had this happen to me in my years of water glassing, just a couple of jars that I noticed were kind of nasty, I immediately pulled them off. One was really bad and I just chunked it, so somewhere in the process the egg had busted and it was no good. The others, I smelled them. They were not terrible, but they were not wonderful. So here's what I did. I took all of my good eggs out. I found the cracked one in the bottom. I washed all of my good eggs off with water and put them right in the refrigerator and used them, and they were just fine. Like I mentioned before, there have been more than a handful of times I have gotten my eggs out of my jar and noticed a crack, and it almost looked like salt in it, but the egg was really hard. Just chunk them. I do not try to keep those eggs for any reason. If there's a crack in my shell, I do not want a chance any type of bacteria that might have been on the outside to get on the inside where I'm fixing to crack and eat. So I just chunk those eggs. Sometimes that does happen and it's okay. If you can toss a couple of eggs and still look on your counter and have a jar full of good eggs that you've saved that's gonna take you through the winter, it is well worth tossing 1 or 2 eggs out of a whole jar that's good, that will allow you to continue to have eggs. If your chickens start to slow up on laying during the fall and winter, it is better to have some eggs than none eggs. I was gonna say none eggs. It is better to have some eggs than no eggs at all. And here is probably the number one question. Well, I have 2. Here's one of them that I get asked. How long do they last? I have used eggs that have been on my shelf in lime water for a year. I have read that they last 18 months to 2 years. I recently spoke at the Okie Homesteading Expo, and I had someone there that sat through my water glassing class, and she told me after, I have water glassed eggs for a really long time, and I have used eggs that are 3 years old. So that just goes to show you this is a wonderful way to preserve your eggs for a really long time and not have to worry about giving them away because you're afraid that they might spoil. So here is another question that I get all the time. Do they taste the same? And the answer is yes, they do taste the same. The consistency when you initially crack the raw egg is a little bit different. The whites tend to be a little bit more runny, and the yolk almost wants to sit in the eggshell, and you might have to give it an extra little toss to get it out. But once you scramble up the egg, or once you bake the egg, I have even boiled these eggs before, the taste is the exact same. So the consistency is different when you initially crack the egg. The consistency is the same after the egg is cooked, and they do taste the same. So now that I've answered a lot of questions, I want us to go ahead and jump in and get started. I'm gonna demonstrate exactly what I do to preserve my eggs, and you're gonna be amazed at just how easy this is. This is 2-day-old eggs. These are yesterday's eggs. Now, I do have a couple that are dirty, so I will not be selecting those eggs. You see that this egg does not have clumps of dirt on it. I'm going to select those eggs that are clean. Now, I have read that the eggs need to be facing pointy side down. I was asked that at the expo. I've never been asked that any other time. I told the lady when she can get all of her eggs stood completely pointy side down, I would like to see that. It's just not doable. She started laughing and said I had read the same thing, but it is just not doable. So you can see that even the ones on the bottom, you cannot stand those up, pointy side down. The rest of them, I will do my best, but it's just really not doable to put them pointy side down. So these were yesterday's eggs, 2-day-old eggs. These were yesterday's eggs. I'm just gonna do the same thing. Okay, now I have all of my eggs in the jar. Okay, now I have all of my eggs in the jar, and here comes the lime time. Now, here is your ratio. I already know that 3 scoops of lime is 1 ounce, but you will need to measure out with a weight 1 ounce of lime to 1 quart of water. Here's my water. You're gonna see it's gonna smoke a little bit. You don't want to breathe that in. I'm gonna pour this right over my eggs. Now this is not going to be enough, so I am going to have to mix again. Here is another key thing that I want you guys to know. When you stack your eggs in, the water must fill the top over the eggs. You do not want any exposure from the top. You only want water. It is literally that easy, y'all. So here is my jar that I just finished. I'm going to label these June of 23 so that I will know exactly what month and year these have been put back. Y'all are gonna see the water start to clear up and the lime is gonna settle in the bottom, and that is okay. It will end up looking much like this, clear with the water in the bottom. These are from July of 22, so almost a year old eggs there. I would recommend to keep these in a place where they're not in direct sunlight. Sunlight tends to encourage things to break down quicker. So if you have a cabinet or a shelf that's out of the direct sunlight, I actually had to move a light into the room just so y'all could see my water glass egg shelf, because I do not have any direct light coming in on those eggs. It will just help them not break down as quickly. When you get your eggs out of your jar, wash them off with water to get the lime off of the outside of the shell, so that when you crack them open, your eggs do not end up tasting like lime. I can assure you they won't be very great. So just like you would normally wash your eggs off before you ate them, if you were getting them right out of the chicken coop, you're just gonna do the same thing. Get them out of your jar, wash them off with water before you crack them open. When you decide to start using your eggs, if I was gonna use my July eggs right now, I could take the top off. If I needed to scramble up 3 eggs, I would just get 3 eggs out of there and crack them open. You can leave the rest sitting right on the shelf. You would rather go ahead and wash your eggs off and you have room in your refrigerator, you can go ahead and rinse them all off and put them straight in your refrigerator. However, with 6 children, that is usually not doable for me, because my refrigerator is usually packed full of different things, cups, sippy cups, and alike. So I like to get out of my jar what I need while I'm cooking or I'm baking and leave the rest in the same jar on the counter. Like I mentioned earlier, unless my water has gotten cloudy, there has been one other time where I was using my eggs right out of here. The next morning I woke up and noticed that my water was a little cloudy. So one, in the process of me using the eggs, busted on the bottom. The eggs were still fine. I washed them off and put them right in the refrigerator. So I think I covered all of the questions that you guys might have had. If you have any other questions, be sure to leave me a comment. I do try to go through all the comments and answer questions. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, please hit the thumbs up and please hit the subscribe button. It really helps us out and it really means a lot to us when you guys do that. But I can't end the video without showing you what an egg looks like out of the jar that has been sitting on the shelf for a whole year. I'm gonna crack an egg open so you can see exactly what it looks like right out of the jar that has been on the shelf for next month will be a year. So 11 months, they come right out of the coop, went right into the jar with lime water, and have been sitting on my shelf for almost 11 months. Y'all, that is incredible. Don't cut yourself short of giving your eggs away unless that's a need in your community that you feel like you need to meet that need. But don't give them away just because you're scared that they may ruin. Preserve those eggs and keep them for the winter when your girls are just not laying as many eggs, and you can have farm fresh eggs right off the shelf. So let's get cracking. All right guys, here we go. Here is an egg right off of the top. We're going to give it a crack. Absolutely beautiful. Hope y'all enjoyed that video. I hope you'll get to preserving those eggs. Happy homesteading, y'all.